Um, and I, okay, wonderful. Well, welcome everyone. I'm really excited that you're all here for our Stronger Together Cooperative Models webinar. My name is Melissa Levy. Uh, oops. I'm serving as the Wealth Creation Specialist at the NATO Research Foundation. Uh, and the wealth creation work that I've been doing is part of the Economic Development District Community of Practice, which is funded by the Economic Development Administration. So I'm really happy to see you all. Just some housekeeping. You can put questions or comments. You can submit them through the chat box on the right side of your screen. This is being recorded and it will be made available on the NATO website. There is a post-webinar survey. Please, I know they're a pain, but please, it's only a few questions and it helps us plan more of these kinds of opportunities. And feel free to contact me at that email, mlevy@nato.org, with any questions about the webinar or wealth creation or anything that's on your mind. Um, yeah, I think that is pretty much it. You can find more information about the Economic Development District Community of Practice at this link here. There are all sorts of things that are happening through the Community of Practice. It's been going on. It's a 5-year initiative, and there's all sorts of resources, webinars, conferences, conference materials, reports. So I encourage you to take a look and see what's there. And also, I just wanted to put a plug in for our upcoming annual training conference in Reno, Nevada in October. I am planning on doing some wealth creation sessions there too. So think about it. And I just want to get a handle on who's here. So I'm just going to do a couple of quick polls just to see where people are from and what kinds of organizations they're with. Just helps. Thank you. Thank you, London. Um, so we'll just do that and see where people are coming from. Looks like a pretty nice variety of people. Uh, all over. And Philadelphia seems like it's on top. That's my region. Go Philadelphia. Great. Okay. So I think we'll end that and share. Oop. Yeah, anyway, we have some nice, we've got folks from all over, which is great. Um, and hopefully you can see this, see the breakdown, where everybody's from. And we will share one more poll and then we'll get on to our content. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, look at this. Well, it should be. It is the Economic Development District Community of Practice. So almost, almost mostly economic development districts or regional development organizations. Perfect. Great. With some other folks thrown in, nonprofit, educational, other. I'm not sure what other is, but Perfect. Lovely. So hopefully you can see this. I see it, but thank you for that, London. I appreciate it. And thanks for playing along, everybody. It just helps to know who's on, where people are from, what their background, where they sit in our society. So I'm going to close this out. And before we get going, I just like to kind of refresh people's memories about wealth creation. That's my focus at NATO and in my own consulting work as well. And these three principles are really key to the wealth creation approach. It's really about creating wealth, broadly defined, which I'll share in a minute, and aspiring to do no harm to any of those forms of wealth. It's about rooting wealth in local people, places, and firms through local ownership, control, and influence, which is really what we're talking about today. And it's about building lasting livelihoods by intentionally including people and firms on the economic margins and also the social margins. Wealth creation is an approach that I've been working with for, I don't know, probably almost 20 years through some work I had done with the Ford Foundation. Um, and it was focused on rural areas, but what I've learned is it can really be used anywhere. Um, and again, those forms of wealth that we use in the wealth creation approach are these. So, intellectual is really about knowledge, creativity, innovation, imagination. Individual capital is really about, individual skills, education, and health. Social capital is all about trust and networks and relationships. Natural capital is air, water, land, soil, all of that. Built is all about physical infrastructure and also information infrastructure. Political is influence on decision makers and shapers, though it doesn't have to be through kind of big P politics. It can be through purchasing or any number of other ways. Financial capital is just like what it sounds like, savings and investment. And cultural is really about traditions, customs, and ways of doing. And we use these capitals in a variety of different ways. One is just what do we have? Doing kind of an assessment or an inventory of where we are. Another way is we can actually design strategies to build these capitals. And then finally, you can actually use them to measure impact. So these are just the key pieces of wealth creation. The other one that I'm not going to go into right here, although it probably could have been useful, is value chains, is building value chains around particular market opportunities. And I think the co-op that we'll be talking about today is probably, I mean, if we think about it, if I thought about it more, and I could have done that, we could have talked about what that value chain looks like. Um, anyway, these are two resources that may be useful as you think about this. One is the actual story was written up that you'll be hearing about today, the poultry co-op in this resource on the left. And then there's a resource about, a variety of different structures available to keep wealth local, including cooperatives and lots of other ones. So you can find both resources and lots of other wealth creation resources at this link here. Um, and yes, there's other webinars that you can take a look at. There's lots of reports and publications, tools. Yes. Um, so we have a variety. Well, we actually have a variety of folks here to answer questions. And but we'll start with Doug O'Brien. I'm really super excited to have him here. He's the president and CEO of the National Cooperative Business Association, and he's going to give us a bit of an overview of cooperatives and how they work and why they're so important to our communities and our economies. And I am just going to pass it over to him. Thank you so
Okay.
much, Doug, for being here.
Melissa, thank you for the opportunity, and thank everyone for taking the time for this really important conversation. And if you want, I actually have a few comments that I want to
Yeah.
use this transition. You're welcome to pull down the slides for a little bit if you want,
Okay.
or you can leave them up, but I can just talk to folks for a few minutes.
Great.
I want to connect um, that setup, that great setup, Melissa, around wealth creation and economic development. Before I came to the National Cooperative Business Association, which is the umbrella group for all kinds of co-ops. I'll talk about in a moment. I had an opportunity to work primarily in rural community economic development in a number of different roles, mostly with USDA and some different places, and came to really appreciate the work that NATO does, and really appreciate those, I'll call them social entrepreneurs, who are in the private sector, who are in the nonprofit sector, community economic development sector, that are really kind of making that magic happen, to get, to root that wealth that you were talking about, Melissa. I love that those three pieces of wealth creation, creating wealth, rooting wealth in local places, and ensuring that everybody is included. And I'll submit, and I'm a little biased. I work for a cooperative association. The cooperatives are kind of a perfect strategy for those three goals. And we'll talk in just a moment. The reason is that cooperatives, they're owned and controlled by the people in the community. Um, and so the multiplier effect of cooperative businesses tends to be much greater than non-co-ops, and that's because any of the surplus, the economic activity that spins off, it advantages the people who own that business, and all those people are in the community. It's more broad-based. I love a great entrepreneur who makes a business really thrive. But at the end of the day, that single entrepreneur probably is ending up with most of the profit. With cooperatives, the profit goes back to the members, and it's the people who use it, and the profits are based on how much you use that business. So just in terms of rooted wealth creation, co-ops are just a strategy that make a lot of sense. And I can't wait to get into the real example here in just a little bit after I just talk for a few more minutes about cooperatives. I love this story and example. So you can post the you can put up the slide now if you want to.
Sure.
Uh, so what are cooperatives? They're a type of business. I mean, technically they're a corporation, but they're a corporation with a really specific ownership and governance model. And they're businesses that put the users, or in co-op terms, they're called members. They put those members in the center of the business. And by USDA, there's a lot of kind of different ways to talk about this, but in the United States, we typically talk about the members, they own, they control, and they benefit from the business. So they own, like, literally, people who use the business own the business. In this case, we're talking about producers, farmer cooperatives. There's other ways. It could be a worker-owned cooperative. People who work at a business could own the business, or it could be a consumer-owned cooperative, which is everything from rural electric cooperatives, that's a consumer-owned cooperative, to credit unions, our financial cooperatives, to a retail business like REI, which is a consumer. So cooperatives, can be owned by people kind of taking different roles in the business or through their economy. The control piece is that members vote democratically on the board, who hire the CEO or the general manager. So no matter how much business that an individual does with the cooperative, no matter how much they have invested in the cooperative, they still get one vote. And that changes the behavior of the cooperative, so that there is that more kind of broad-based benefit, and then benefit. So any surplus or profit goes back to the members based on use, which I mentioned before. So there's your 101 kind of on what a cooperative is. Next slide, please. In the United States, co-ops are a big deal. Almost half the people, that number 1 in 3, this actually is posted from a cooperative impact report we put together last year, but actually that number is more like 2 in 5, or even more than that. There's 150 million people in the United States who are members of cooperatives. The majority of those are members of credit unions. And then that's almost 150 million itself. There's over 40 million people who are members of rural electric cooperative. Those utilities, energy, electric utilities that are owned and controlled by the people who use them. And then you've got the majority of farmers are members of at least one cooperative. Many are members of more than that. And then there's food cooperatives and housing cooperatives and worker cooperatives. You see some of the other numbers there that co-ops are a big deal. Actually, across the world, over 1 billion people are members of this, special kind of business. So, next slide, please. So the co-op difference, why do people choose to use co-ops? And we're going to get real granular and kind of real world here in just 1 minute when I hand it over. But this is a way that we talk about it is co-ops ensure that people have access to critical markets and affordable, high quality services. So rural electric co-ops and credit unions are great examples of this. When those are created, working class households, poor households, rural households didn't have access to electricity. It took the co-op business model for people to come together to access financing, access the resources to build these businesses, and then rural people had access to electricity. Working class homes had access to good consumer financial. Um, Cooperatives act in the best interest of their members in the communities in which they operate. It's simply in the DNA of a cooperative that they need to be responsive to the members, or the members will vote out the board, or the board is going to change who the general manager or the CEO is. That's how it works. So they're going to be responsive, and the people are of the community. So that cooperative activity, the work of the cooperative is going to reflect the values of the community. And then I already talked about keep wealth and profit circulate in the community just by its very nature. So next slide, please. This, I think, is my last slide, just to get a sense of where our cooperatives, and I know this is small, but it's illustrative. First, the colors, the blue ones, commercial sales, marketing, production, mostly ag cooperatives. That's the blue ones, and you can see upper Midwest down into the plains, but sprinkled throughout California, the Valley, also in the East. The red ones are financial services, credit unions mostly, but there's other cooperative banks. You'll see that's shows up where people are. Pretty reflective of the spread of the population in the United States. Green is utilities. That's in rural places everywhere. So that's rural electric cooperatives mostly. There's a lot of water cooperative, telco, broadband cooperatives as well. And then there's other types of cooperatives that are sprinkled. So there's about 30,000 cooperatives across the United States, or 30,000 establishments across the United States, and to a very big impact. So that's cooperatives, what they are, why people use them, what they do. Now let's hear let's hear this story from Virginia about really kind of rooting it in the ground. So I look forward to this. Thank you, Melissa.
Right? Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so here we are, the creation of the Central Virginia Poultry Cooperative. So I'm going to turn it over to Lauren Pugh from Commonwealth Regional Council. Thank you so much for being here. And we have a whole crew of people that can speak to the work that has been going on with the Central Virginia Poultry Cooperative, but I will turn it over to Lauren. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Melissa, and thanks for hosting this webinar. And thanks, Doug, for setting the stage for the overall what a cooperative is. That definitely brings a good background to kind of what we're moving into. So next slide, please. So I first kind of wanted to give you an overview of where in the state of Virginia we are. Most people, when they think of the state, they think of maybe Hampton Roads, Williamsburg, Northern Virginia, or Richmond. We're not in any of those areas. We're actually a very rural locality. Most of our population we have about 100,000 in population wise, and our biggest town is about 7,000 people. So we're very, very rural community. Next slide.
Okay. Oops. Sorry.
No, you're good.
I don't know why it's not letting me. Oh, is that the next slide?
Yep, that should be. Oh,
that's it. Yeah.
Yep, there you go. Thanks. So I just wanted to give you guys a bit of background, kind of where we started and why we set up the poultry group. So back in May 2023, we actually had a Tyson plant closure in Glen Allen, Virginia. And because of that, many of our farmers had their contracts terminated. So these were actually broilers, which you'll hear that term a lot. They're actually meat chickens. So a lot of, originally the farmers were growing those type of birds, but once the plant closed, they had to think of some new alternatives and decide on some other options to, how they are going to go about their operation. So because of that, that Tyson closure, they kind of had to, like I said, rethink a couple things. So they actually reached out to the CRC, and we actually wrote a letter to the governor of Virginia, just to kind of see if there were any other options for them and kind of start the conversation. Out of that conversation, we went ahead and had a meeting with the Secretary of Agriculture and Forestry, Secretary Lohr, and then we hosted a meeting with all the major players to brainstorm ways to assist with these displaced farmers. So that included, Roxy Johnson's actually on the call, and many of her team members from the poultry cooperative. She hopped on that meeting, including her husband. And then we also had, like I said, Secretary Lohr and the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Community Services. We had the Virginia Department of Economic Development, our county administrators from each of our 7 counties that we were actually members of, and then just anybody else that was able to assist, with helping out with the brainstorming ideas. Out of that conversation, Secretary Lohr kind of encouraged them to look for some integrators to see if they can kind of take on the broiler businesses and see if there are any other techniques. So that's exactly what they were looking for. The poultry farmers went out in around June of 2023 and continued to look out for other broiler companies. So they actually went out and contacted every broiler company in the United States. Unfortunately, at the time, they weren't interested in taking on that particular, taking on the broiler companies. So they had to think of some other ideas, and somebody came up to them, one of another industry person, and shared the idea of, having a table egg producer, potentially coming in and doing a conversion opportunity. The next slide. Mm-hmm. So out of that, they were still in the conversation with the, finding a new integrator or potentially, establishing a new type of, poultry farming. So they went ahead and talked with us and thought of some new ways for some grant opportunities. So another partnership arose out of that. So that's how we kind of got involved. They kind of requested that we work with them, and then we started applying with assistance of Virginia Affairs, and Tony Banks is actually going to call us the Virginia Farm Bureau nonprofit that assists with like poultry cooperatives or other agricultural businesses for like grant writing or other opportunities. They assisted with, some grant writing at the state level. So we really focused on more grant writing in the state of Virginia with that. And at that point, we actually submitted several applications. So we submitted 5 total applications through the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Community Services. And we're actually in a tobacco region. So back in the day, we had a lot of tobacco farmers. We still do have some, but just not as many. So we actually are within the Tobacco Commission, area. So we did apply for 2 grants through them as well. The Poultry Cooperative was actually established in December of 2023. So they got together over 70 farmers in a room and discussed the opportunity with them. And then they start the business up in January of 2024. Next slide, please. Out of the conversation with the integrators, they did finally receive a contract from Dutch Country Organics, which is a company based out of North Main, Middleburg, Indiana. And this contract was not to do broilers, but to sell them cage-free, free-range, and pasture-raised eggs. So this kind of gave them a different opportunity where they would have to convert many of the houses that the owners already had and convert them into a new house, basically new facility, which requires a lot of capital. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. After they got the commitment, they started up the Poultry Cooperative. We were awarded, the CRC was awarded over $1.7 million in grant funding from, like I mentioned, the Tobacco Commission and the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services to fund the startup costs for the Central Virginia Poultry Cooperative. That does not include any of the funds that would go into basically converting the houses. That was actually on the farmer side. And like I said, we'll talk about that a little bit later. In April 2024, the first chicken house was converted. So we actually had the first one converted in Nottoway County from, like I said, from a broiler house to an egg-laying house. And it's actually one of the pictures from one of the houses that they converted that we actually toured in April. Next slide, please. So now you kind of have the background. I kind of did want to give you an idea of where we are right now. This is mostly from 2025. So right now we have about 15 farming operations for the Central Virginia Poultry Cooperative. In those farming operations, 41 converted houses. So that, like I said, they were either originally broiler houses, like meat chicken houses, and now they're being transitioned into, they were transitioned to egg laying houses or houses to raise pullets, which are like smaller chickens. In those houses, in the laying egg houses, they had about 100,000 egg laying chickens. And out of those 100,000 egg laying chickens, they had 24 million eggs produced in 2025. So good amount of eggs. And then for pullets produced, they had 1.5 million produced last year. And as far as the money goes with the farmer's investment, they had about 3.25 million in total farmer investment. So next slide. So why did they decide on a cooperative? There's a couple reasons why they did, but really, honestly, it was more of looking at it as a regional approach. They didn't want every farmer that was experiencing this issue where they were completely displaced to go be looking for a bunch of different opportunities and, not maximizing the amount of funding and resources that were available. So they just thought maybe together they can strengthen their partnership and collaboration and combine the resources at a regional approach and be able to attack basically what the options were available. And it seemed to work well for them. Next slide, please. So of course, with any kind of business that you have, you're going to have challenges. This is more for the cooperative side. They definitely had a lot in the beginning, and they're only about over 2.5 years old right now. So they may experience some more down the road, but right now, this is kind of what they've seen as they've got started. But right now, capital challenges has been a big thing. Currently, we don't have any other layer companies in the area, so there really wasn't anything for the banks to kind of look back after and see, what options were there out there. There also were a new company, and so they didn't really have anything to look back off of either. So banks, like I said, were very cautious to loan due to the high volume of capital needed to remodel the houses. The other thing was land pricing. So our farm equity in Virginia and our part of Virginia is not maybe as higher as some of the farm that maybe is out west that typically do layer houses. So that kind of was an issue with banks because, again, they were cautious because we didn't have the higher farm equity available to transition the houses. So that's, again, we have the pullet opportunity, which was great. So that was a good other option for them. Grant-related challenges. One thing is just language barriers, like as in the language. Roxy and Ken and Tony are have their farm language. Like we were talking about broilers in the meeting before and pullets and trying to understand their farm language. And the same thing with us. They're experts in their field, but we may be experts in our fields where we talk about VDACs, which is acronyms. We throw acronyms out there all the time. So just being open and just explaining acronyms and having a conversation about that, I would definitely say that we all had that conversation where we, opened up about, learning each other's different languages, quotation marks around that, and just trying to understand how that portion went, that portion is so that we can get through learn the grants and understand each other to write the grants. That was one thing, like you got to understand language to write the grant. Timelines as well. Because when you began the application and we wrote the application, we were just starting this process. It was very young. We were learning about, how long we think we're going to be, how many numbers we thought we're going to get chicken wise, how we're going to get through this whole process. And when we got to the grant, once we got it awarded and actually in the grant, sometimes the timelines might not necessarily equal up to what we originally thought it was going to be. So we've had to do a lot of, timeline adjustments, some budget adjustments, and kind of equal out with how much time it actually does take for us to get a farm off the ground, for it to get converted over from broiler to an egg laying house. So definitely some challenges with the timelines. As far as, egg pricing, of course, as many of you probably experienced, you had $6 or $7 egg cartons probably about a year ago, with the AI or the avian influenza. So eggs are commodity pricing. So of course you had an increase in egg pricing. It affects some, the supply and demand. So it happens a lot with egg pricing. So that's also a challenge within the cooperative itself. The next slide, please. Some opportunities as well with the cooperative, like I mentioned, avian influenza, or what they call AI2. I almost say it's the original AI almost, because it's probably older than AI itself. But the AI created an opportunity for replacement birds or pullets to meet the demand for farmers that experienced AI. So the poultry cooperative was able to kind of utilize that. Luckily, in where we're at in Virginia, we didn't really have a lot of issues with AI compared to some other parts of the country. So they were able to grow the birds here and then ship them out to other places that had unfortunately had the AI epidemic in their farms. The other thing would be for opportunities is about 50% of the nation's population, of course, is within 500 miles of our region. So it just opens us up for other opportunities beyond the egg laying operation for expansion. So we're excited to kind of see how the poultry cooperative expands. Next slide, please. Yep. So local economic benefit of the cooperative. So not only the local economy, I mean, we did have farm operations that, of course, got to keep their operations open, but we also had allied industries that were able to sustain themselves and gain some additional revenue off of these cooperatives. So like whether that be a propane company coming to, bring propane to the facilities to keep it heated because they have to keep them up pretty high, or, feed. That's another option, or even trucking companies. That's one job I mentioned in there. There's a trucking company in a small village center in our community called Rice, and they actually use them to haul feed. So that is something that keeps it local. So because they are kept local, they also have disposable income to spill in our local economy as well. Of course, I mentioned before about the investment. The farmers had to do a lot of investment into their own houses to transition from the broiler house to a layer or a pullet house. So that was, that local economy aspect was being put back in, whether it be a contractor coming in and establishing that, or purchasing equipment, et cetera, like that for the business. Jobs wise, the Central Virginia Poultry Cooperative did hire 5 full-time employees to operate the cooperative. And the same thing with the farms that were still in business. You have about 15 farms stay in business. And many of which those farms have employees of their own. So they hire employees to come in and help manage the farm. So they stayed employed, or they hire additional employees for that farm. They also have a trained local crew to conduct vaccinations, and the pullets, which, like I said, are the smaller birds. Once they get to a certain age, they move them to the egg laying houses. So they also are used for that. And they also purchase Virginia feed pretty remotely local to us. So most of the feed that they get is from the Shenandoah Valley and Roanoke. So typically they purchase about 14 tons of feed for both the pullets and the layers. Next slide, please. So I know many of you guys are EDDs like ourselves. As far as as you probably saw throughout the presentation, we've kind of been involved throughout the project from the beginning to now throughout. So we're still in the grant administration process right now. Our biggest things, that we definitely were involved with were acting as a liaison. So we coordinated meetings, talked with poultry farmers, led the conversation, and discussed, different aspects of the project as it kind of came to fruition. We also served as a grant applicant and the physical agent on all 5 of the grants. So as acting as a physical agent, as many of you probably have experienced with your projects, but we basically ran the grant funds, ran them through our books to basically to reimburse the cooperative for the expenses that they had expended. Also, we serve as the grant administration, as mentioned, for all 5 of the grants that we are awarded. So that comes with submitting reimbursement requests, filing required reporting, ensuring grant compliance, and just managing budget requests, among other tasks, whatever arises with certain grants. Next slide, please. As far as the grants themselves, we utilize 2 funding streams at a state level typically for that. So we use the Virginia Tobacco Regional Revitalization Commission, or what we call the Tobacco Commission. We received about $1.4 million in grants from them and 2 different grants. And most of that was just used for startup costs, like they actually used some of it for some Virginia Affairs consulting services for business startup. They also used it for bird purchasing, transport expenses, feed purchased, and grower pay to kind of help the first initial grower pay to set them up. We also use VDACs, which is the Virginia Department of Agriculture and Community Consumer Services as well, to do 3 separate grants. One was a planning grant for more like I said, the startup costs, like legal costs, which would be like the bylaws, and then the audit. They had to do a yearly audit, and then any kind of financial services, so having a financial person on staff for that. And then the AFID infrastructure grant was like eggs, shuttles, and washers, and so was the rural rehabilitation grant that was used as well from VDACs. We also had a lot of local government investment too. So the VDACs grants that we utilized, 2 of the grants that required a local cash match, to be able to utilize that grant. So we actually reached out to our 7 counties and see if they were willing to provide the local cash match, and they said they were. So they contribute about $56,000 in cash match total across all 7 counties towards that grant to go towards the infrastructure cost and the planning cost. Next slide, please. So that's all I have for you guys today. That's just kind of giving you a brief background on kind of where we started to where we are now in the poultry cooperative. If anybody has any questions after, like now or after my contact information, my email is on there. And also Kristen, who's on the call as well, the executive director from the CRC, is also, her contact information is on there as well. So I guess we'll open it up to questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much to unpack. I feel like, yeah, I mean, I guess, London, are there any questions in the chat we should start with?
We do have one question in the chat from Cheryl on EDA funding for cooperative business expansion or workforce development infrastructure. Not sure if anyone has an answer to that one, but we'll throw that out there first.
I can comment on it. I'm happy to defer to others as well.
Yeah, go
Okay.
for it.
Cheryl, good to see you as always, and a great question. The answer is, in short, yes. To my knowledge, it's not real common. I mean, a couple of examples include there's a $6 million grant award to the Midwest Energy Cooperative in Michigan for road, sewer, and water infrastructure. So that was that's an infrastructure cooperative, electric, etc. Roanoke Natural Foods Co-op, which is a food consumer co-op, they did receive EDA dollars. And it was essentially infrastructure around the cooperative, EDA dollars to do some of the roads and sewer on the way into that. I think the short answer is, as nonprofit economic development entities, co-op development organizations, many of In many of your jurisdictions, there's a dedicated 501c3 that focuses just on co-op development. That maybe is one kind of takeaway that I'd bring to the table for the EDDs on here is if you don't know your CDOs in your jurisdiction, you could reach out to me. You could check out there's this group called Cooperation Works. It's those cooperative development organizations. They're great partners. They're eligible for EDA dollars. It could be in partnership with the EDDs. It could be, they could sub to you, etc. So there's examples, but we'd love to see it be a much more common strategy.
Thanks, Doug. Yeah, I mean, I want to give space for like Roxy or Tony and Ken to share about their experience kind of on you've all been playing different roles in this cooperative. I'd love to hear, for instance, Roxy, you're actually one of the farmers. So how did this process feel from your perspective?
Well, we probably started off with terror when we heard that Tyson was closing down.
Of
You live
course.
on your farm and you work there and it's your home and that's all you know. And then so we had to try and build something a little bit different. So we just I tell everybody we were stubborn and determined and dumb, and we just went forward because we didn't know any better. And we just met and talked. And when this opportunity came up for eggs, we started learning about the egg business. And we have Ken, who's an egg man, and Tony, who helped us along, and Lauren. All of us, you need a lot of hand holding is what you need to get through it all. And we had a lot of that. But it's been a great thing. And we decided on a cooperative. I mean, we could have gone through a company route, but we had been with a company, and we didn't like that very much. When you shut down, you got no say in what's happening to yourself. This way, we all had a voice. We could talk to each other, be a unit together, and that was just what we wanted. That was
Yeah, real partnership. Yeah,
That's right.
that's
And we share knowledge, and we call each other all the time and discuss what's going on, and we can meet whenever we need something. It was the best way to go.
excellent. And yeah, I mean, Tony, I've had the opportunity to talk with this group over time and learn about the ins and outs of how they work together. And it's a really neat story. And as I was listening to you, Lauren, I was like mapping out the value. To me, it screams like a value chain. Like you've got all of these different partners that are playing together and mutually benefiting, right? You talked about that kind of the allied, those companies that maybe aren't part of the cooperative, but that are benefiting from the work that's happening. I mean, you've got a really interesting kind of, yeah, I was starting to map it out in my head, which I wish I had done when we had first talked. But yeah, Tony, Ken, anything you want to add? You're the egg man.
Um, I've had an interesting relationship. I was one of the original directors, and then I retired, and then I came back as an interim president the last year and a half. And with a background in farm credit and finance, and as well as having run an egg operation before and been an ally to the egg industry, selling equipment to them, it gave me several perspectives. But it's kind of a really close group that has made a decision that they're going to work together for the benefit of themselves and their community. Because as you think about what's involved, and you mentioned it, Melissa, you have someone decide they want to go from broilers to eggs. Well, they might have a 63-foot by 500-foot chicken house today, and to convert that from broilers to eggs costs over $3 million. So now they go out and they hire local construction crew to, as you saw, lay the block, build the building, contract crew to contract and put in all the equipment, the barn scrapers, the equipment company to put in you saw the tiered system that was in there so the birds can move up and down, kind of almost like a metal tree. You couldn't really have wood because of biosecurity and how much it will retain disease and so on. So you kind of build them a metal tree and give them places to lay eggs. And that's another part of that $3 million. So as you look at the cooperative and you say, look, it wants to grow to eventually over 1 million chickens, and it's going to cost, depending on the type of equipment, $20 or $30 per chicken. It's a tremendous investment. And obviously that local banks get involved, the regional council gets involved, the state gets involved. It's a community project, and everybody has to kind of put in a piece. And then you end up, as you said, you end up with propane company having business so that we have the heat to, because the baby chick has to be at a day old. You got to keep that 92 to 94 degrees. Well, you can imagine that takes a good bit of propane in the middle of the winter to heat a 3/4 of an acre, 30,000+ square foot barn to 92, 94 degrees. You have the sawdust, you have the biosecurity. It goes on and on and on as you start seeing all the different pieces of the web that are involved in a business like this building and growing. You've got as you mentioned, the feed supply, talking about down the road wanting to get into the feed milling business, because when Tyson was there, they bought up the local grains and there was a deficit of corn and soybeans. Now there's a big surplus. All the local corn and soybeans are having to be trucked out of the area because there is nobody else in the area to grind them up and use them for livestock. There isn't enough livestock in the area. So it's a really interesting business that, being a commodity, kind of grows in spurts. A young business that's taken a lot of time to convince the bankers to finance the individual farmers. I mean, you're sitting there and you're saying, well, it's a new business, it's a new company. There's nobody else in the area. If it doesn't work out for us as a banker to come in and take it over, and you're asking us for not hundreds of thousands, but millions of dollars, and that's just one house. So it's really taken a little more time than I think everybody anticipated to be able to get everybody on board. We're very fortunate. We've got 4 houses now in the process of being remodeled. So we are in a significant growth phase. We have been as you saw, we put a lot of barns back in business raising pullets, and that's, basically a day old baby chick to 16 weeks when it's time to put it in a layer house and start prepping it for laying eggs for the next year and a half. So we've had, Roxy, as you well know, a lot of interesting discussions in our board meetings as everybody has to try and wrestle with the opportunities and make the right decisions for the long term. And I think being a co-op, it's a little different perspective. You don't have a person sitting there saying, okay, how can I make the most money? You have a group of people sitting there saying, how can we build a business for the long term that's going to be best for all of us? And that's been interesting conversations in the boardroom.
I bet. I'm curious, there's all these ancillary businesses. The co-op is the poultry growers, right?
The growers themselves formed the co-op,
Okay.
and they essentially raise pullets for other people and for their own houses that they need the layers for. And then they own chickens and place them in the growers' houses. Yeah. And then the growers themselves are contracting all these services. as it relates to the layers, as it relates to the 1.5 million pullets we grew last year. Those are services of co-op contracts because it's
Oh.
essentially a caretaker. It's getting paid to take care of somebody else's baby chick and to make sure it gets fed every day and has all the water it wants, and the environment is kept, in good condition. You don't have water leaks in the house where you have damp spots, and the temperature is kept right, and we have to vaccinate them so they don't catch diseases down the road. And so we have vaccination crews that come in at once or twice, maybe a dozen people per a day. And then we also have to move them at the end of the flock. It takes a whole crew to, as you can imagine, to catch all these birds, to load them all on trucks to haul them all. Some of them end up in Missouri, Michigan, Indiana, Texas, Pennsylvania, just all up and down the East Coast and all the way out into, Missouri and Texas.
Wow. That's amazing. And I guess the other thing, I guess, Kristen and Lauren, is I'm struck by the EDD role. Like, I mean, this the roles that you're playing with this cooperative are roles that you play in lots of different spaces. So it's while the cooperative might be new to you, like you're supporting grant writing and grant management, and so these are things that EDDs do. So like you're just doing them in a different kind of economic development kind of space. But yeah, Doug, go ahead.
I don't mean to jump ahead if Lauren or
Oh, go
others
for
have,
it.
but it builds right on. Um, so in my observation, and actually the literature bears this out, cooperatives, once they're established, they tend to have a greater success rate than non-cooperatives.
Mhm.
They last longer. There's a lot of reasons for that. But cooperatives do at the beginning, they can arguably have a harder time starting up. And I'd say for two main reasons. One is that it isn't just a couple people or one person who decides, I'm going to create this business and here I go. It's a group of people who need to have a common understanding, who need to, generally agree on the strategy, and actually need to learn something about the unique governance structure of a cooperative. So that takes time. It takes, both financial and time investment, from a bunch of people. So you tend to need to have some organizational support from the outside to make that happen. Could be a cooperative development organization, could be, another group. The other thing that makes it harder for co-ops at the beginning is by their very nature, they put they put people ahead of capital because the way cooperatives are designed, they don't prefer investors. It's not that the investor is driving the decisions in pulling out all the profit for him or herself. It prefers the users, the members of the cooperative. Well, a natural byproduct of that is it's harder to get capital into a cooperative because capital, people who control a whole bunch of capital, they don't tend to flock to a cooperative where they don't have control and they don't have guaranteed preferred, profit. So that I'm getting to your point where EDDs, and this is such a great example, they needed the cooperative needed some influx of capital at the beginning to make it work. And EDDs are so well positioned to actually understand how to navigate these different, resources, public resources, and then of course you need to partner with private resources. So that's I'm sorry, that was a long answer, but just this marrying of EDDs and co-op development, it really makes sense here.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that, Doug. I think it does make sense, and that's why I love the story because the Commonwealth regional council really played that role in finding the funds. I think assembling this group and helping to assemble this group and make this. I mean, I can't remember where the cooperative kind of knowledge and facilitation came from. I don't know, Kristen or Lauren, if you can speak to that, but I think that's one thing that EDDs do really well is kind of un understand a problem and figure out how to bring resources to bear to come up with a solution. And also find the partners that will help kind of support a certain kind of economic development too. So, and I think that's what CRC did here, which is kind of exciting. So, but yeah, it's so funny because I feel like I've been talking to these folks for so long, and it's been a while since we've talked about it. But Kristen and Lauren, like, did you have the cooperative development kind of expertise to help support these folks, or was that brought in, or is that Tony or Ken's expertise?
Yeah, so we did not have the expertise of the cooperative background at all. We typically don't deal with as much with agricultural sector, even though that's a prime good within our community. I would definitely say we do more locality work and more nonprofit work. So luckily, Roxy and her crew from the poultry, maybe Ken, your crew had some connections with Virginia Fair. So that's kind of where Tony Banks comes in. He has more expertise on the agricultural side of things, the knowledge, some of the background in that co-op work, and then also just bringing in institutional knowledge. I know a lot of times with the poultry farmers, they talked with other co-ops in Virginia. So, for example, there's one out of the Shenandoah Valley that does similar. I don't think they do layer eggs. I think they just do regular chickens. But correct me if I'm wrong, Roxy or Ken. They have chicken operation up there. And I think they talked a lot with them to kind of get some insight from them on some of the co-op, how that worked for them as well. But I'll let Ken and Roxy kind of elaborate a little bit more, maybe their opportunity and how they kind of brought in maybe some different, groups of people into, establishing the co-op.
Well, we did meet with when we met with all you guys. I think he steered us towards an accounting firm up in Harrisonburg, which helped with the turkey co-op that's there. So we met with them, and they gave us some inside knowledge what they had been through, and we're still talking to them. We're still using them. So it's mostly just been the whole state helping us along, and everybody's been really willing to give some help when you don't know what you're doing. So, and we've had a lot of help.
That's great. So it's okay. Yeah, because that co-op is, that's a specialized, that's pretty specialized information, right? About how to put that together. And yeah, go ahead, Ken or Tony, whoever. Somebody was speaking up in it.
Yeah, this is Tony Banks with Virginia Fairs. Virginia Fairs is a rural cooperative development center. We've been supported by USDA for the past 20 some years. We've worked with a number of different types of agricultural co-ops in the traditional type, as well as what USDA used to refer to as new generation co-ops, which were essentially LLCs that were set up with cooperative governance. We've also done some work with local rural electric co-ops on some of their individual projects, where we were brought in to maybe perform feasibility studies or help with facilitate strategic planning and other things like that. So, and that's kind of what we did here. And probably I want to say September through November, we probably spent at least weekly. We were having meetings with the steering committee, and we were just walking folks through the process, talking about what co-ops are, what they're not, and as the steering committee decided to commit to the co-op structure, then those conversations shifted to what what do we think we want to approach the lawyers and the accounting firms with? What's the business model we think we would like to move forward with? And so we had a lot of those conversations and sometimes disagreements because that's some of these conversations can be challenging. I think Roxy and Ken can back me up on that. But eventually, when we did, the steering committee did go to meet with the law firm and the accountants. I think we had a pretty good idea, and we basically approached them and said, "This is what we think we want to do, and tell us if it's legal, and tell us where we might, be making a misstep, or if we're on track." And so I think that helps, facilitate the official legal and financial planning as the co-op got up and running. I mean, again, they were chartered in December of 2023. They Tyson had made its announcement to end boiler operations in Central Virginia in March. The birds were gone by May of 2023. So this was a very, very fast process. We've worked with some other groups that the process was a lot more measured, a lot slower, but you have the opportunity to take your time when you don't have that sense of urgency that the growers in Central Virginia had at that point in time. And I guess to kind of to give the group some perspective on the economic impact of the closure, we estimated that the total economic impact of just closing the broiler portion of Tyson's complex, because they continue to raise eggs there for their breeding operations, but just the closure of the breeding portion itself, we estimated that was roughly a $350 million annual impact. So it was a pretty significant loss, not only to the 7 counties within the Commonwealth Regional Council area, but also in addition surrounding counties for live production, as well as a processing plant that is located just north of Richmond.
Wow, that's significant. And I wonder if that, you said that it went quicker than others. It must have been the urgency kind of helped propel it to want to create impact sooner, is my guess. But I mean, you've dealt with other cooperative developments. Do you think that that's true?
Yes, it's certainly. I will say this: the urgency of the situation certainly piqued everyone's interest and willingness to support um, the broiler growers that were affected. So there was um, it was really an all hands on deck, and I think Roxy or Lauren may have said that, may have used that phrase earlier this afternoon, but it really was an all hands on deck situation, and it's it's quite the undertaking.
Sounds like it. But yeah, it's an exciting story. Yeah, any other, questions, any other comments anybody has?
Well, I always thought we looked at it more like we were family getting together and
I love that.
fight about it and figure out what we need to do and then still stay together. So Tony herded us along like cats is what he did.
But it's working, so that's great.
Yes.
It's exciting.
Yes, it is. If you need to fight, just go ahead and do it, and then we'll talk about in public. We'll talk nicely, and we'll fight about it in the back room if we need to.
I think the disagreements seem to be they've lessened in the the past several months. So
Mhm.
we're making progress.
They have. We are.
What a great story. I love it. Well, I put to these questions if others, I don't know if there are others on the call who have ideas of areas that, cooperative development might make sense in their regions or resources for EDDs to consult as they think about supporting these kinds of developments in their regions. I don't know if anybody has anything to weigh in on. Kind of open it up if others want to talk about things happening in their regions that might be relevant to this discussion. We can be pretty casual if you want to like unmute yourself and just, we're not being formal here. We're just kind of chatting, but, um, oops. Yeah, I'm touching buttons, but yeah, anything in anybody's regions that might be relevant. Yeah. Well, and I guess I should say also, cooperatives are just one, you know, technique for keeping wealth local. There's lots of different techniques. This is the one we're talking about today, which is great. It was the year of the cooperative last year, Doug. Yes, I missed it. I missed it. We got it in 2026, but oh well.
Every year is the year of the cooperative, as far as I'm
I
concerned,
tend to think so too.
I'll just mention, Melissa, that I
Yeah.
dropped in the chat
Oh, great.
a link to a map that Cooperation Works put together in Virginia Fair. I just double checked. Virginia Fair is on that map.
Oh,
So if an
cool.
EDD is interested in digging deeper into potentially co-op, a good place to start is talking to a cooperative development organization in your region or that covers your geography. And I also mentioned Tony was um, that one of the things that going to a CDO, they know which accountants and attorneys actually understand the cooperative business model, because it's not that common. I mean, and it can be. I know of too many stories about a group of people who've gone through some early stages and think, hey, co-op might be right for us. But then they go to an attorney and the attorney doesn't know co-op. So the attorney is going to say, oh, no, no, you don't want to do that, and steers them towards some other type of business organization, which, as you
Uh,
said, Melissa, co-ops they're not the end all be all.
no.
But in many situations, they really do make sense. And if you go to a business advisor who doesn't know co-op, they're going to say do something else. So it's great that Tony was able to do that, and you've got people in your region to do it.
So have the right advisors and yeah,
Mhm.
professionals to help.
Yeah,
Hmm.
I would add that probably half the inquiries I receive are from I mean, fortunately they're small co-ops, but for these folks it's important. But it's inquiries from new co-ops that they've been chartered. They're somewhere between up and running and stumbling along, and all too often that just what Doug mentioned, they sought counsel. It may have been a relative or someone who's going to give them a bargain or maybe do some pro bono work, and they don't incorporate the principles of the co-op in the bylaws, or it's just missing. So we spend a lot of time counseling, especially smaller co-ops, on maybe re-examining the bylaws and going back to their council and suggesting more discussion and changes that will help make that organization run the way the members would like to see themselves operate the co-op.
That's great. Yeah,
And
thanks for
for the record, I am not a lawyer. I am not an accountant, and this is what I tell everybody when they first talk to us. But we do like to talk and just walk them through the process. As I tell them, I'm going to try to save you $400 an hour, or whatever the going rate is in that part of the state. And so I'm cheap.
And we like that.
Yeah. Roxy brings cake to the meeting, so that's always a good
Food is always
Incentive,
helpful.
food
Yes,
helps.
food definitely helps. That's really, yeah, it's been quite an education for me just about the poultry industry, I have to say. Just all the terminology at first, I was like, I don't, there's a lot going on here, a lot more than I understand. But yeah, Cheryl, go for it.
Thanks. Good to see you too, Doug. I had to catch one meal today, so I had to get on the camera. But wow, cool presentation, you guys. Ken and Roxy and Tony, great work. And thank you, Melissa. In Minnesota, one of the things that and I'm a long-term, Doug knows this, fan of cooperative structures, have been for many, many years. And I think one of the things that kind of occurred to me that was the EDDs and the practitioners sometimes don't always know what kinds of questions to ask to help with succession planning and understanding whether, and that's why this is so informative. In our state of Minnesota, we're working with CDS, and it was on a call this morning, and some others that are doing co-op work, as Doug was talking about, those statewide organizations that offer technical assistance. And we're going to launch a series of webinars that we're going to design over the next several years and tie to some of the really cool tools that Doug has through his organization. But to dive a little deeper as to, for instance, if you're a lender as an economic development districts, there are some nuances. They're not unsurmountable, but personal guarantees are not worth the paper they're written on, obviously, because it's, right? Like it's a different way of doing business with a co-op structure. Taxes are different. And so to have practitioners, whether it's farm business management people, economic development districts, others that are sitting with businesses thinking about succession, understand some of those nuances to be able to be informed enough to say, yes, here are some things that you should be thinking about, and then give referrals of a list of several attorneys and CPAs that fully understand this kind of specialized business structure. And so that's one way that EDDs can be involved. We're not the experts on co-ops. Congratulations to all you that have done it, because now you are somewhat of an expert, Roxy, you are. But I do think being that liaison when you are the first point of contact and having enough information or know what questions to ask in order to understand if that kind of structure might work is the education we're going to try to do in our state with practitioners. And that should be fun. It's a first start anyway.
That's great, Cheryl. I'm really excited to hear that. I think you're right. Knowing the right questions is the first. I can't wait to see that. That's cool. Aw, excellent.
I love
Yeah,
that. Of course, Cheryl. I love it. I love Cheryl too. We've got to
as
work
do
together
I.
for years. Uh, One thing I'll mention, I'll drop a text. This is going a little bit beyond the agriculture and farm cooperative we talked about here, but it is a conversion. So for EDDs whose one of your priorities in your strategy is business retention,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, all of you know this a lot better than I do. There are businesses, mom and pop businesses in your community, in your region, that pencil out, they make sense, but there's no buyer for them. There just isn't a buyer for that restaurant, or it could be a small manufacturing plant, whatever it is. There's just nobody who's interested in doing it. More and more, there's a focus on co-op conversion. So moving that mom and pop into a business that's owned by the workers
Mm-hmm.
or the consumers. So there's examples of small town that still has a grocery store and a bar, and one of those businesses about to close. And the consumers in that small town and in the region say, no, that's too important. And so they turn it into a co-op, into a consumer co-op. And then, same thing with workers. And I'll put some resources in there, but it's a really good business retention strategy. But as one of the themes here, it's not easy. I mean, you need to have the right technical assistance, and you need to have some people around it who actually understand the financing, et cetera. And
Mm-hmm.
and EDDs are the ones to put that puzzle together. So love that.
That's great. Thanks,
Yeah,
Doug.
it's been great knowing that our community, Lauren and Tony, all knew that we were a very rural community and we needed something in our area. I mean, we'd lost tobacco, we'd lost dairy, and this was the poultry industry was going too. So we needed something to put back in our region, and they knew this, and our government knew that with the Secretary of Agriculture and the governor, and they were all very involved in knowing what our community needed. It wasn't just brushing us off and saying, "Oh, you're just a rural community. You got 10 people. Nobody cares." They really did care and put us back to work.
No, that's amazing. That's political capital right there, is making the case. Yes.
Yeah. It made a big difference.
That's great. Others, questions? Anything anyone wants to share? I don't want to keep, we don't have to go till 4 if we're done, but I just want to give an opportunity if anybody else has any questions or anything they want to share from their own places. Okay. This is great. Oh, go ahead, Tony.
Melissa?
Yes.
Yes. I'm I can't access it right now. But after this is over, we there's about a 20-minute video that was produced here in Virginia, and it covers an ag co-op. It covers an employee-owned business conversion, and it also covers a worker co-op. It's very well done, and I'm going to share that link with you. And if you would like to share that with the participants today,
absolutely. Yeah, I would
I
like
would
that.
recommend it.
Thank you. No, I would love that. I'd probably send a note out to everybody who's on and then those who registered but maybe aren't here with a link to the recording. And that would be a great thing to add too. I love that. Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome. And the ag co-op that's featured in that is the other poultry co-op that was created about 20, 22 years ago. And they raise turkeys.
Oh, right. You mentioned the turkey co-op. Cool.
Yep.
That'd be amazing. Yeah, I can't wait to see it. Great. Well, again, I just wanted to reiterate just resources to this is the original WealthWorks website from the group of regional hubs that still keep this going. There's a lot of great resources on there if you want to learn more about it. And then we have our own microsite at NATO that has a ton of stuff on it. As I've been doing this work with NATO, there's a lot there, including this case study, which is, again, there's more in there. I mean, it's certainly amazing to hear from the people on this webinar too. It's been lovely. But I know that London put in some resources in the chat. So please, take a look and please come to Reno. I'm going to be doing more around wealth creation there. I've been putting together a game that we play at these sessions sometimes to think in this different way about building wealth, keeping it local. So, think about coming. I would love to see you there. And again, this has been put on through the Economic Development District Community of Practice, funded by the Economic Development Administration. And I've enjoyed all of you. This is me. If you have questions or you want to reach out, but I just want to thank Doug and Tony and Ken and Roxy and Lauren and Kristen for being here, sharing this amazing story and just, giving us a sense of how it really works. I think I love, the idea of cooperatives, and I love all of the different ways of thinking about keeping wealth local. And I think we all want to keep our wealth local and regional in our places. And it's not easy, but it's nice to hear about the folks on the ground making it happen and with the help and the support that they've gotten over the past few years and to see that it's working. So I really appreciate you all sharing. And I appreciate all of you for being here and joining us. And that's what we've got today. Thanks for being here. There is going to be a survey if you don't mind filling it out. It's just a few questions. It will take you a couple minutes, but it helps me and us figure out, what else people are looking for, how we can do this better. But it's been lovely to see you all, and I hope you all have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Melissa.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. All right. Yay. Thanks. Thanks again. Oh, and I have
Yeah,
to stop recording. That was good.
I think it was great. Yeah. Hopefully I did everything right.